Hi everybody, this is a review video for the first graders Black Death pandemic. So this section talks about some of the consequences Europe went through after the Black Death pandemic situation. So economic change occurred after the pandemic, but also medical practice and health protocols improved after the pandemic. So medical system and health system was improved after the Black Death pandemic situation in Europe. While medical practice was still outlawed for those not affiliated with the church, more people turned to independent practitioners, allowing exploration treatment, extending beyond the church doctrine. So, as you guys remember, it was still illegal, right? It was still illegal for ordinary person to become a doctor because in this 14th century, only the clergy members could become official doctor at this time. So after pandemic, it was still illegal for normal ordinary people to become doctor, but more and more people turned to independent practitioners. They depended on more and more people depend on non-clergy practitioners, non-cleric doctors, and allowing exploration and treatment extending beyond church doctrine. Because, these people after pandemic didn't have no choice. Of course, they would have liked to love to go to see cleric doctors if it's possible. But the thing is that these cleric doctors, so many of them just died during the pandemic period. So just these ordinary people, they don't have no choice but to go and see whoever is possible to cure their disease. So people just depended on more independent practitioners. So because of this, naturally, the church doctrine, church's power, start to decline because more people seek whoever is possible, right? So the government followed suit with many European governments, creating efficient public health protocols. So here, each government, they followed suit, right? They imitated each other, right? So when one government comes up with an efficient public health procedure or public health protocol, other government followed suit of the case. So as an early example, the Council of People in Pistoia, Italy, created as a series of health ordinances at the height of the outbreak in an attempt to quell the pandemic. So, for instance, case like Italy created health ordinances, right? Ordinances is like law or policy or regulation. Italy come up with a efficient health ordinance at the height of. So here, at the height of means at the climax. At the climax of the pandemic year to solve the pandemic. So Italy has a good system, so other governments followed suit, imitated Italy's system. So additionally, early forms of quarantine were developed. Infected ships were required to wait in the harbor, and those who were sick were not allowed to enter cities. So I guess many of you guys might have heard about the word quarantine nowadays because of the coronavirus. So basically isolate, right? So this early form of quarantine developed after the pandemic. So these ships, like cruising ship, who turn out to have a passenger who's infected by the disease, had to stay in a harbor for a long time. And also people who carry bacteria not allowed to enter the cities. So the effect of the pandemic immediately impacted people's religious belief, allowing for religious exploration. So here in this part, we're talking about medical changes, right? Medical changes after pandemic. Now we're talking about the religious changes after pandemic. So the Black Death pandemic impacted people's life, religious belief after pandemic. So the church lost many clergy members during the pandemic, as Henry Knighton described, in Montpellier, only 7 friars were left from 149. At Marseille, only 1 Franciscan remained of 150. So, not only just farmers and ordinary people, but also clergy members died. Many of them died during the pandemic period. So, this Henry Knighton, he described the scene. So he said that in France, famous Montpellier, I guess this is quite a famous monastery in France, I guess. Monastery, or the temple, right? Where the clergyman stays and teaches the Bible. So in Montpellier, before pandemic, they had 149 friars, but after pandemic, only 7 survived, right? So this friar is the same meaning with the clergyman, right? Same meaning. And also in Marseille, another monastery, they used to have 150 friars, but only 1 survived after pandemic. So these lots of clergy, from whom the public sought for medical and spiritual help, caused people to search for support from different sources, including independent medical practitioners and early Christian reformers. So many people, like in 14th century, people depended on for clergymen for spiritual help, but also medical help. But now that so many clergymen died, so people had to find the different sources for medical help and spiritual help. So that's why people start going and see more of independent practitioners. And people start to seek from the healing from like Christian reformers, not just the traditional Catholic churches. So additionally, people questioned why they were not saved from God's punishment, even though they gave generously to church. So after pandemic, people start to question why they were not saved from God's punishment, even though they gave a lot of money to the religion. People became more skeptical, right? And they asking questions. So these 2 consequences, these 2 consequences, so here, 1, too many clergy members dying, and also people start to question about the doctrine of about the Catholicism. So these 2 consequences contributed to growing mistrust. So the belief toward the religion became weakened after the pandemic, and so the weakened Catholic Church allowed for later religious reformation because this traditional Catholic became weak, so it led to religious reformations later on. So some people took religious matter into their own hands by practicing public self-flagellation. So I told you that this flagellation is the action of whipping, right? Self-whipping. So instead of going to church or instead of depending on the church for their religion, people start to do their own religious practice. For instance, like public self-flagellation. More and more people committed to self-whipping, they believe that they committed sin or they committed crime in front of God, so they want to pay back. They want to compensate for their actions or for their sin. So more and more people practice self-flagellation and believing that atoning for their sin would repel the plague. So people believe that the atone means pay back or compensate. So they believe that if they compensate for the sin they committed, they believe that they could expel, they could remove, repel, right? Expel or remove the plague. So flagellation was a part of a larger movement called the lay piety movement, a precursor to large reformation, reflecting religious individualism. So this flagellation was in other words, it called as a lay piety movement, right? So I guess this is a normal people's sincerity movement. So more and more people like participated in lay piety movement, and it became a precursor, right? So it became a precursor. Here means it became a beginning, or like herald, became the beginning of the larger religious reformations reflecting religious individualism. So more and more people like practice religion individually after pandemic. So a decade after the pandemic, early reformer John Wycliffe openly challenged. He openly challenged the church's authority by translating the Bible into English, as he wished for his countrymen to no longer be dependent on the church's interpretation. So this English person, John Wycliffe, he tried to translate the Bible. As you guys remember, the Bible in 14th century was only written in the Latin language. So people had to depend on the clergymen to read and understand the Bible, which is written in Latin. So John Wycliffe, he translated this Latin language into English. So more of his countrymen could just practice or could learn about the Bible without depending on the church. So Wycliffe like challenged the church's authority by translating. So alongside shaken religious faith, European culture was devastated. So this part talks about how religion changed after a pandemic. Now it talks about how culture was changed after the pandemic. So with the prevalence of unexpected death, the masses realized death's inevitability. So during this pandemic period, more and more people experienced unexpected death. Their family members, friends, and colleagues just died unexpectedly. So the mass here, mass means the public, or just people. More and more people realize that the death is something happening to everybody. There is no exception. Death, inevitability. So art in the years following the pandemic exemplified this mindset by showing its grim influences. So these many artifacts after pandemic, they show this mindset that death is happening to everybody with a grim influence, with a depressive image. Depressive influences. So artists cope with the devastation by recreating works featuring a new dark genre, the dance of death, or dance macabre. So many artists, they reflected this trend of dark age, dark genre, and because so many of artists practice this new trend, it created a new genre called the dance of death, or in Spanish it's called as dance macabre. So this genre, an allegory on the universality of death, represented the notion that regardless of one's social status during life, everyone will dance the same dance of the death in the end. So this new genre is an allegory. So I guess allegory, we can say the allegory is a comparison. So this new genre is talking about the universality of death, which means that death happens to everybody, it applies to everyone. So this genre represented the idea that regardless of one's social status during life, whether you're a king, or you're a president, or you're a CEO, or you're a celebrity, everyone will dance the same dance of death in the end. In the end, everyone come to pass away. So aside from this new genre, there was also a notable spike in morbid art, like The Triumph of Death by Peter Bruegel. So aside from here, so apart from this new genre, there was a notable spike. There is a notable increase, right? Increase in this morbid art. So morbid it means something like scary or spine-chilling art, which deal with the topic of death. So this morbid art was increased significantly after the pandemic. And the example of this art is The Triumph of Death by Peter Bruegel. And not only the artwork, but also additionally, the pandemic influenced scholars and poets like Giovanni Boccaccio and Petrarch. Early humanists often hailed as the initiator of the Renaissance. Not only the artwork, but also the scholars and poets like Boccaccio and Petrarch was also influenced by this trend. And Boccaccio and Petrarch are early humanists, and they are hailed. So they are respected as the initiator, as the frontier of the Renaissance. So these, not only the art itself, but also scholars and poets also developed much after the pandemic. Okay, so this is how far we covered last time. So you guys did a good job participating, and we'll continue our lesson next time. Okay, thank you. Bye bye. So everybody, thank you.